Hello, friends, and welcome to the first ever episode of For the Plot, which is my new space to scream into the void about all of the weird things that I get up to, all the side quests I go on, and all the stories that I want to tell you. Every week, I am going to tell you about the things I've been up to in the past week. Then, we're going to have story time, where I tell you a slightly longer story, usually about something ridiculous that has happened to me. And then we'll go into some lore. Sometimes that'll be about me, about my life, about friends, about the world that I'm living in. Sometimes it's just going to be fucking random. So bear with me. It's the first time that I record something like this. So I know you're going to forgive any weird little technicalities. And maybe somebody who knows more about video and audio can tell me what I should be doing to make this sound a bit more legit. So, last week, whenever I'm catching up with someone, I kind of like to go in reverse chronological order. And this is kind of what this feels like to me. It feels like a bit of a catch up. Treat this as if I'm sending you a really long voice note. So, yesterday I had coffee with a friend in the morning, and she was telling me, yeah, before Christmas, I had someone staying in the apartment, and they took the keys and they put the keys through my letterbox. And now I am based in Berlin, for those of you that don't know. And I think if you're living outside, I mean, I only have the reference of the UK and Berlin. But if you live in the UK, when you say you put something through the letterbox, typically that's through like the front door of the flat or the house that you're living in. Outside of the UK, pretty much everywhere else, your letterbox or your post box is basically like a small box on the wall that you need a separate key to open. And so this friend that had been staying with her put the keys through her letterbox. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, she doesn't have the key to open that particular letterbox. And so we were talking about how she could get them out and what that would look like. And it reminded me that I had a very similar situation when I stayed with a friend in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. So basically, I'd been staying with my friend. He wasn't in the apartment at the time. I had the keys. I'd been coming and going as I liked. And then I left because I was planning to take the train out of Amsterdam. And I got to the train station, and I have so many horror stories with trains. This is one of them. I'm not going to dive into too much, but basically, there'd been a big fire outside Amsterdam Central Station, and there were no trains leaving the station. So I was like, well, okay, I guess I can't leave today. And I was going to stay another night. And then I thought, oh my God, but how am I going to get back into the apartment? So I went back to the building, and I'd posted the keys through the letterbox. And basically, it was quite a shallow letterbox. So I thought, okay, maybe I can like somehow like reach in and get them. I don't know. So I tried to put my hand into into the letterbox. Obviously, it didn't fit because my hand is bigger than a letter. But what I did have in my bag was a reusable metal straw. So here's a win for the sustainable agenda. If you're carrying a metal straw and you happen to post keys through a letterbox, you can use that metal straw to reach in to the letterbox, hook the keys, and pull them back out. So that's exactly what I did. I basically like stole the keys back from the letterbox. For those of you that are listening and not watching, just so you know, I just had my first technical faux pas where the microphone basically slipped down. Oh, and I've just hit it with my nail. Slipped down away from my mouth. So apologies for that. So, at the weekend, it was kind of my first return to society after 2 weeks of being sick. I was lying on the sofa, had like crazy fever, coughing, whatever, for about a week, and then took a week to rest. So last week was kind of a big deal because, yes, I was re emerging into Berlin. And I had quite a full weekend on. I'm still working in reverse chronological order, by the way. So on the Sunday of the weekend, I was meeting a friend in a cafe that we'd been planning to try out. And on the way there, I I saw something like, I want to say it's unusual, but for Berlin, it's not really unusual. I was walking through the neighborhood, and there's a little park, and on the corner of the park, there was basically this kind of scene taking place. So behind the railings of the park, there were two people dressed in, I guess, quite theatrical costumes. I don't know how to explain it, but they were giving me like wolf vibes or like, I don't know, um, otherkin vibes. Very theatrical, very dressed up. And they seemed to be wrestling, like grappling with each other. And then in front of the railings, there was basically like a load of teddies, like a row of teddy bears and furry animals, like watching these two people fighting with each other as if they were an audience to it or something. And then to the side of this scene, there was somebody in one of these big blow up T Rex costumes holding a pram, like a baby buggy. And I just walked past, and I swear this kind of thing is actually pretty normal in Berlin, but there was nobody sort of taking photos or videos, or like this didn't seem to be something that was happening to be recorded. It just seemed to be happening for the sake of it. And yeah, it was kind of, they weren't furries, but it did feel quite furry coded. And this was funny to me because the night before I'd been at a dinner for a friend's birthday, and I'll come to more on that in just a second. But at some point, the conversation turned to furries, as it does. And in case you're not sure what a furry is, it's an enthusiast for animal characters with human characteristics. So it's typically people who are wearing these big, furry costumes. They're sort of anthropomorphized dogs or cats. They've got these kind of big eyes, like big suits, like really, really big suits. And yeah, so we were talking about furries. And I personally have never actually had a close encounter with a furry, but I have from afar. So at my old job, in our old office, there was one day, I think it must have been July or August or something. It was the middle of summer. It was absolutely sweltering. We couldn't get enough air into the office. One of my colleagues stood up to the window and was like, guys, it's kind of like a queue of people on the other side of the canal, because it was on the canal, on the other side of the canal, queuing to go into this building. And he said, yeah, they're all wearing like big costumes. It's like, oh, that's weird. So the whole office basically gets up to look. We'll go over to the window, and lo and behold, outside this building opposite us, there is a queue of like 150 people dressed in these furry costumes, these big suits. And they were going into this hotel, the Estrell Hotel, which is, by the way, one of the most bizarre buildings I've ever seen. I'm sure at the time when it was designed and built, it was like the pinnacle of architecture and it was supposed to reshape the Berlin skyline or whatever. But it's basically just like a big glass triangle. And yeah, so there was this queue of 150 people in their furry suits outside the hotel. And I was thinking, I don't know what they're doing, but that is commitment to the fucking culture, because it was honestly about 35, 36 degrees. So I got a bit curious, and together with my colleagues, we were basically looking up what they were doing, like searching Estrell Hotel furries. And lo and behold, it was a conference for furries, which is called Eurofurence. Sorry, Eurofurence. Mustn't let them down on that pun. So Eurofurence is basically the annual convention of furries, and it used to be held in Berlin. Sadly, it's no longer held here. It's held in Hamburg now. You can check it out if you're interested. But the program was basically, they would do photo shoots. Obviously, you go to a lot of effort to put together these suits and get into the suits. So you had photo opportunities in like different settings, in the park, in the hotel, by the pool. There were meet and greets with like famous furries, I guess, from the scene. They had a dance competition that was called Paws on Fire, which I just think, really hats off to you if you can dance in one of those suits. I think it's incredible. And yeah, then they also had like an auction. You could sort of auction yourself off and people could bid for you and then do whatever you like during the day. As I understand it, it's, like I said, it's not a culture I know a lot about, but as I understand it, it's not always a kink or always sexual or always for gratification. But I think some of the program was definitely more aimed towards that. So anyway, that was my experience with furries from afar. Back to the dinner and away from the conversation of furries. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect with this restaurant that we were going to. My friend wanted to go to somewhere where she could eat ribs. And so we went to effectively like a steakhouse. And I am vegan. I wasn't sure what they were going to have that was suitable for me. There was others as well, but she had checked in advance, and they did have some things on the menu, so I can't really complain. But the restaurant itself, like the vibes were so odd, honestly. First off, the location. It's kind of in the center of Berlin. It's in a place called Alexanderplatz, which, like, to be honest, you don't really go there unless you're passing through it. And the restaurant was somehow on the second floor, but it didn't have a first floor or a ground floor, so it was just sort of like suspended in the air. That's the only way that I can describe it. And I'm sure that I have cycled past it many, many times and not even clocked what it is. There was live music or semi live music. There was a guy singing live, but sort of pushing buttons, I guess, to go along with it. And I swear, every 90 minutes or so, he was playing Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday. And it kind of became this running joke that this was like opening the portal that allowed you to enter and leave this place. And so we all arrived. We sat down, we said congratulations. My friend was looking absolutely gorgeous. We'd spent a couple of hours beforehand at my place getting ready, doing the makeup, all of this kind of stuff. So we arrive, we sit down, and the staff bring over the menus. And first thing I was looking for was the vegan options. Like, do they actually have the vegan options I expected? They did, thank God. So I had something to order. But menus in places like this are like one of my absolute favourite things. So I don't see it so much back in the UK, but certainly in countries where English is not the native language, sometimes the menus are just kind of wild. That's not saying it's explicitly that. I've definitely seen it in the UK too. But what I mean is there's no structure to the nomenclature of the menu, which, like, I kind of can't believe that that sentence just came out my mouth, because what the fuck, what a wanker. But what I mean is there's like no consistency or coherency to the way that the menu is structured, or the names of the dishes, or anything like that. So for example, this exact menu, I'm opening it right now to look at, and they have bread and soup, and then appetizers to share, then they have starters and salads, and then they have signature, which is like all of their house meat dishes. And then we come on to a section called No Steak, No Life. And then there's a section of the menu called Hong Kong Dumplings. And then the fish part of the menu is called Sexy Fish. So there's like no consistency in the way that the different sections of the menu are named. Then if I come into the names of some of the steaks. So in this like fine steaks and cuts section, they have a princess steak, they have a master steak, they have a ladylike steak, and they have a like a boss steak, which is really screaming like 2012. Then I think my favourite part of the menu was actually the cocktails. Hold on, give me a second, I'm going to find these. So I actually don't drink, I'm sober, but even so, I found myself looking at this cocktail menu because some of the names were just so hilarious. Here we go, signature cocktails. We have got Beast Lover, Letter 4U, as in the number 4, Gucci Tiger, Playboy Punch, Pink Bitch, Prince Charming, and I think these two are my favourite, Disco Pussy, and Trouble Cock. So this is what we had on the menu to choose from. Now, story time. Story time this week is not specifically about the time that we spent in this restaurant, but it is related. So my friend, whose birthday we were celebrating, she has quite serious allergies, and milk and dairy are one of them. Like, we're talking, if she drinks milk, she's probably going to go into some sort of anaphylactic shock. And at some point, she'd ordered her ribs. Like I said, this was like the thing she was really looking forward to. So she ordered the ribs, and they came with fries. That's how you can tell I've been outside of the UK for a long time, because I now call chips fries. Just let me have it, right? So they brought over fries and these sort of padron pepper things, and they sat them down in front of her. And I was looking at them, and I was thinking, I think that's got cheese on it. And so she'd actually already, I didn't see this, but she'd already had one or two. And I was like, just hold on a wee second. I think maybe there's some cheese or parmesan on those. And so we called over the waiter, And bearing in mind, we'd already said she has these like life-threatening allergies. And I was like, do they have queso on them? Do they have cheese on the peppers or on the fries that you've brought? He said, yeah, they've got Parmesan on them. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. Parmesan is cheese, my guy. So she'd already had like one or two fries. She stopped eating them straight away. She didn't have any reaction in that moment, thankfully, but she was starting to feel a bit sick. And the next day, she was really sick. So I'm quite shit hot on this kind of stuff because I've been vegan for a very, very, very long time, and I have accidentally been fed milk on a couple of occasions. And it's super unpleasant. Like, I don't have an allergy, but definitely I've developed some sort of lactose intolerance. Story time is loosely related to this. So in 2021, I started a new job, and I was building out the team in Berlin, but the headquarters of the company was in Munich. And so I was visiting Munich for the first time to meet some of the other teams there that I was working with. And we decided to go for a big dinner together. And I was already a bit nervous because I'd heard that Munich was like not very vegan friendly. It's not super progressive or woke. It's a very different city to Berlin. It's beautiful, by the way. It's just not my kind of place. Anyway, one of the people on the team booked a restaurant for us to go to. And we were quite a large group. We were about 24 people. And it was a tapas restaurant. And I thought, okay, so I'm in for a night of patatas bravas. That's totally fine. I can handle it. So we arrived to the restaurant and they seemed quite overwhelmed by how many people we were, even though the booking had been made for these 24 people. And they hadn't asked us to order in advance or anything, which, by the way, they should have. So they just presented us with a menu, and then we had to figure out how the fuck are we going to order for 24 people who all want different things and all have like quite strong opinions about what they want to eat. So when I tell it now, it sounds so obvious that this is not how you should do it. But anyway, it seemed to make sense in the moment. Basically, we wrote out all of the dishes on the menu on a piece of paper and passed it around the table, and people could basically put a tally next to something that they wanted. So we did this, and actually it seemed to be quite effective. And then one of the girls, she basically took the sheet of paper, she consolidated it and was like, right, are we all sure this is how much we want to order? Yes, this makes sense. And so then we gave this piece of paper to them and explained, we've just put the tally, like the number, next to the things that we want to order. And so they started bringing food out. They brought out some bread. And bearing in mind, I already knew at this point that all that I was going to eat was bread and potatoes. They brought out some bread, but none of it made it to my end of the table. I think the other important context is I had not eaten for about, 8 hours, which for me is a really long time. So I was starving. They brought out the bread. I didn't manage to have any bread. And then they started bringing out other dishes. So they brought out like a fish dish, and then there was some sort of, beef situation. And then they brought out this dish that was octopus. And they brought it over, and I was like, oh, who wanted the octopus? And everyone's like, nope, I didn't want the octopus. Okay, must have just brought it by accident. Someone took it and was like, yeah, I don't mind eating it. And then they brought out some roe, like fish eggs. And I was like, who ordered the roe? Who ordered the fish eggs? And everyone was like, nope, that wasn't me. Didn't order it. And then over the next 5 minutes or so, they started bringing out things that we definitely hadn't ordered. And at some point, someone realised they've taken the list. They think that we've ordered at least one of everything on the menu because they've seen all of the menu items. And then on top of that, they're bringing the ones with the numbers. So at some point we had to be like, stop bringing food, stop bringing the food to us. And at this point, these potatoes that I'd been waiting for had still not come out. I was starving because this whole process had taken about an hour and a half. So I grabbed a waiter and I said, hey, it would be really great if you could just bring out those potatoes, the ones that are just like cooked in oil. He's like, yeah, no problem. So 5 minutes later, they bring me this dish of potatoes and I dig in. Like, I am absolutely going wild on these potatoes, smashing them down my throat. And then after a few minutes, I'm like, oh, nope. I do not feel well. I really do not feel well. And so I went to the toilet and I was violently sick. Like, so aggressively sick. I was like, okay, compose yourself, wash your face. I hadn't really like clocked what was going on at this point. So we go back to the table. And I'm like, I don't feel so good. But I sit there and I'm trying to make conversation with these new colleagues of mine who I'm trying to ingratiate myself with. And then I started to feel sick again. So I go back to the toilet and I was sick. And I go back to the table, and again, another like 5 minutes of trying to socialize. Then I have to go to the toilet again and be sick. And I come back, and at some point, I was just like, my God, they're going to think that I either have a bladder problem or some sort of bulimia. And either way, I don't care because I'm being really sick. So I'm just going to have to excuse myself and go home. So I basically said, hey, I'm not actually feeling that great. I'm just going to head back to my hotel. And I left the restaurant. It was only like a 10-minute walk back to the hotel where I was staying. But on the way to the hotel, I threw up on the side of the road maybe 3 or 4 times. It was so undignified. And Munich is such a clean city. Like, you can kind of get away with this in Berlin, but I think it's very, very, very irregular to be kneeling on the side of the road throwing up into a drain in Munich. So eventually I made it back to my hotel, went to bed, woke up the next morning feeling a little bit rough, looking a little bit grey. And I went to the office and I had a meeting first thing in the morning with my team. And I said, yeah, something didn't really agree with me at dinner. I was kind of sick last night, not great. And I didn't really have an appetite that day anyway. So later we went for lunch, which, by the way, in Munich, everyone stands up at 11:57 a.m. to get ready to go for lunch so that they can have lunch bang on the dot at midday. We met with a larger group of people, so people outside of our team, and we went to this kind of place nearby where there's some food trucks and things like that. And I was sitting at a bench and I was like, I really don't feel like eating. And someone that I kind of vaguely knew just from Microsoft Teams, yeah, it was that kind of organization, came over to me when I was sitting with my team. And he was like, oh, hey, Beth, you're looking a bit rough. And I was like, wow, rude, but okay, thank you. He said, oh, did you have a big night last night? And I said, yeah, I mean, we went for dinner with the team. I wasn't feeling so great. And yeah, I'm still not feeling great now. And he was like, oh, do you have a bit too much to drink? And I was like, actually, no. Because other context you need to know about me, I'm sober. I've been sober since 2015. I don't drink alcohol. And he was like, oh, right, okay. Weird, because I actually saw you last night. I was like, what? Said, yeah, I saw you last night when you were walking back to your hotel and I saw you throw up on the side of the street. I was like, for fuck's sake. How undignified. So, turns out that these potatoes were deep fried with butter and oil, and not just oil. And that is why I was really sick. And I remember I was telling a friend about it. And it was around about the time of, actually after that trip, lots of people from our team got COVID. We were like in the midst of COVID, basically. But we referred to this incident as potato COVID. And to be honest, even when I think about it now, it still turns my stomach. But I couldn't eat potatoes in any way, shape, or form for about 2 or 3 years. And I had to reintroduce them to my diet slowly, like a baby. So, time for some lore. Let's go back to the dinner. We had obviously told the restaurant staff that my friend had these allergies. They brought the fries with the parmesan. She's allergic to dairy, whatever. So they didn't really respond very well in the moment. And so she decided to write an email the next day explaining the situation. And the response to that email was also apparently unsatisfactory. And so we, the guests of the dinner, we were tasked with leaving the restaurant a bad review. Which I have done dutifully. And actually, I do sometimes leave reviews, but more than leaving them, I read them. I actually think I probably read reviews more than most people I know, but I'm not reading them to make a decision about a place. Usually I'm just reading them for pure entertainment and enjoyment. So it's one of my favorite things to do. If you're going somewhere new, or if you're going somewhere random, or you just want to drop a pin on a map, look at the reviews, and you can either filter on 1 star or sort the reviews from lowest to highest. So you see all of the people who are like really angry and unhappy with the place. And so I did do that for the restaurant. And there were a lot of bad reviews about the quality of the food, about the service. But I think this was my absolute favorite one. So 1 star. We were expecting a lovely evening, which unfortunately turned sour when the food was served. The steak, which is in the higher price range, arrived well done and tough. After we politely pointed this out to the waiter, he said, "Yes, you'll have to wait until halfway through," which I just think is one of the funniest things ever that a waiter could say. Like, "Oh, your steak is actually rare, but it's just in the center." As we left, he said, "Goodbye forever." Not very professional, and according to the reviews, this isn't the first time this has been tough. Yeah, so I highly recommend finding places and looking at the bad reviews. It's actually something that I did with some friends on a trip last year. So for a friend's birthday, we took a little trip to some cabins in the woods in Poland, and we were planning to cook dinner and have breakfast and things like that whilst we were there. So we didn't want to go to the supermarket and buy lots of fresh stuff in Germany and then drive to Poland and then unload it there. So we thought, okay, let's see if we can find the supermarkets nearby. And so I looked at where the cabins were, looked for the nearest supermarkets, and there were two close by. And I was just having a look to see what people were saying about them. And honestly, some of the reviews were absolutely hilarious. So one of the supermarkets is called Dino. And yeah, let me just read you some of the bad reviews about this place. So this first one, they close way ahead of schedule. We got there 2 minutes before closing and it was closed. It was a scandal. Where can we buy sausage now? And actually, when we looked through the reviews, this was kind of a running theme that the places were closing a much earlier than their closing time said. So then we were getting a bit anxious that we wouldn't actually be able to buy something. Here's another review for the same place. The service leaves much to be desired. The saleswomen are rude and downright rude. The black-haired woman with glasses, absolutely called out, is particularly unpleasant, throwing away merchandise at the checkout. She doesn't even say hello or anything, as someone else described. She's doing a favour by working even though no one is forcing her to work there. Mr. Marek is always super polite. Maybe he should do some training for some of the ladies. Unfortunately, the customer is king. This slogan doesn't work here. Time to move to a competitor. This Mr. Marek is apparently the only redeeming quality because there's another 1-star review that says the staff aren't friendly except for Mr. Marek. The store is in constant disarray with unstocked pallets and out of date prices. And this one, oh my goodness. This person was definitely a disgruntled customer. I was recently on holiday with my pregnant wife and we decided to check out what was going on at Dino because this chain of stores is not used on a daily basis, and I regret that we even went there. The store is neglected. Everything is scattered and out of place. The store staff are reprehensible. There's no empathy or any culture. The ladies who work there are punished, and their facial expressions speak for themselves. Despite the queues on hot days, there is no understanding when it comes to pregnant women. I do not recommend this store unless someone wants to develop a nervous breakdown. The store staff need to be replaced because they do nothing but pick their noses with their fingers. So we'd looked at this place and I was like, I'm not sure if we should go to Dino. And then the other option was a place called Biedronka. So we looked at the reviews for Biedronka and here are some of the things that they had to say. Supposed to be 10 p.m. I walked 3 kilometers. I arrive at 9:15 and it's closed. What a scandal. So again, we were getting a bit anxious that we weren't actually going to be able to go to the supermarket. Pallets everywhere. It's impossible to shop normally. A tragedy. The store is a mess. Nothing has its place. You have to search for everything for a long time. The store apparently closes at 10 p.m. and 15 minutes before it's shut. This is the first time I've met someone who closes an hour before. And then I think this is my absolute favourite one. I'm looking for a driver from Biedronka who delivers goods and fucks Asian mother. Oh my goodness. So yes, I did leave a review for the restaurant that we went to at the weekend, and I hope that it might help someone else with a dairy allergy to emphasise to the staff the importance of checking the allergens of dishes. But then when I was thinking about this review and leaving this bad review, I was wondering, what is the first ever bad review that we have on record, right? Because like reviews are just this, like I said, social proof. And the best review is this word of mouth, you know. You go to a cafe and you tell a friend that it's good, that friend trusts you, and so they go to the cafe and they have a good experience. Or if we're talking like, I don't know, back in ancient Egyptian times, it's like, ah, yes, this cloth merchant sells really good cloth. You can go here to buy it. And then the other people, they're going to go to this particular cloth merchant. Or, yeah, I got really good bread from this baker. You need to go to this baker to source your bread. Like, you know, this social proof thing. But I was wondering, I mean, and the same is true of like a negative experience. Oh, I went to this fisherman and the fish were rotten, and you don't go to this fisherman again. But I was wondering what our first documented bad review was, and I discovered that it was actually, or at least the oldest one that we have on record, according to Western history, um, was from 1750 BCE. So that's about 3,776 years old. And it is a tablet, a clay tablet that we call the Complaint Tablet to Ea Nasir. So it was discovered in Ur, or modern day Iraq. And it's a tablet that was written by a very unhappy customer who we only know as Nanny. And so the context and what is actually detailed in the tablet is that this merchant, Ea Nasir, was a copper merchant and had travelled to Domunto, bought copper, and then returned to Mesopotamia to sell it there. And on one particular occasion, he had agreed with this person, Nani, the author of the tablet, to sell copper ingots. And so Nani, who I'm assuming was incredibly wealthy, because first off, he was buying copper ingots in Mesopotamia. And secondly, he sent a servant. So Nani sent his servant with the money to buy the copper. And the servant brought back the copper and explained what had happened. And it transpired the copper was of very poor quality. Nani was not happy and asked the servant to go back with it. And then the servant was treated very poorly and very rudely by Ea Nasir. And so Nani decided to write about this. So he inscribed on a clay tablet about this experience. And it's basically our first ever physical 1-star review written down. So this was the first episode of For the Plot. It's a little pilot. It's a little test. I am very open to your feedback, your input, what sort of stories you want to hear. And I'm looking forward to sharing next week's side quests with you.